Before you dive into this scary story, make sure you subscribe to the channel and like it. It helps us create new scary stories. My name is Victoria, and what happened to me changed my life forever. I always considered myself brave and independent, but crossing the border in America turned out to be a trial I could never have foreseen. In this video, I will tell you a story full of mysteries, terror, and unexpected twists. If you are ready to immerse yourself in an atmosphere of a true nightmare and discover what might lie beyond the familiar world, stay with me until the end. I grew up in a small town where dreams of freedom and new opportunities were almost mythical for me. However, an inner voice always hinted that my destiny was meant to be something more than a quiet life in a familiar circle. That's why I decided to set out on a journey, hoping to find my fate. The American dream beckoned me with its glitz, promises of change, and new horizons. But no one warned me that every dream has its dark side. My journey began on a late evening when the sky turned a deep indigo, and the stars seemed to watch me as if they were a portent. At that moment, I had no idea that fate was preparing something truly inexplicable for me. My first steps onto the territory, where reality and myth merged, were filled with excitement and a hint of fear. Memories of my childhood home mingled with a premonition of the challenges to come, and every minute of my journey felt as long as an eternity. The first obstacle on my path was an abandoned border station, about which legends were told. They said that inexplicable phenomena had once occurred there, and now this place had become a meeting point between the world of the living and the realm of shadows. An eerie silence surrounded the station, and the air seemed to be saturated with a mysterious energy that sent shivers down my spine. It felt as if nature itself was warning me of the impending danger. I gathered all my courage and took the first steps toward the ruined building where, according to local lore, the border between two worlds was once guarded. Once inside, I immediately felt the darkness gathering around me. The half-forgotten corridors, covered in a layer of dust and neglect, whispered of times long gone. Every crack in the walls seemed to be a witness to terrible stories, and the slight creak of the floor beneath my feet reminded me that I was not in a safe place. Deep within the building, I noticed an old map marked with mysterious symbols and paths leading beyond the known world. This discovery was the first hint that my journey would take an unexpected turn. The further I went, the more I found myself in a deserted alley on the outskirts of the town, where a building that looked like a sanctuary of oblivion harbored many secrets. I walked through narrow streets where time seemed to have stopped, and every house could tell its own story of a past filled with pain, suffering, and love. It was here that I met a strange woman dressed in an old-fashioned coat, her eyes filled with wisdom and sorrow. Her voice was soft but penetrating. "You are seeking answers, Victoria, but remember that some doors open only at the cost of great sacrifice." This moment became a turning point in my story. The stranger's words made me pause and wonder, what price might my search for the truth ultimately demand? I could not turn back despite the warnings. An unquenchable thirst for knowledge burned in my heart, and I understood that only through trials could one find the true meaning of the world. The further crossing of the border proved to be far more ominous than I could ever have imagined. On that night, when the moon hid behind the clouds and the wind howled through the windows of an abandoned house. I felt as if unseen entities were watching me from behind. They seemed to be waiting for my arrival, ready to open the doors to the unknown. With every step forward, I increasingly felt that reality itself was beginning to fracture. In the corridors of the old building, time seemed to slow down, and the shadows grew ever denser and more menacing. The sounds that had previously seemed like a mere echo of the past now took on distinct shapes, transforming into a soft whisper that uttered mysterious words. These sounds, as if guiding me toward a hidden passage, led me to a concealed door, behind which, according to legends, lay the answers to the questions tormenting my soul. And so, after several hours wandering through the labyrinth of abandoned corridors, I found myself standing before a massive wooden door, adorned with carved symbols, reminiscent of ancient rituals. The door was ajar, and as soon as I stepped over its threshold, I entered a strange room where the smell of damp earth mingled with that of old books. A ray of light, filtering through a small window, illuminated dusty beams, as if to remind me that even in the deepest darkness, there is always a glimmer of hope. In the center of the room stood an antique writing desk, upon which lay a dust-covered notebook. I carefully opened it, and my eyes fell upon lines written in a neat handwriting that seemed to belong to fate itself. The notebook's pages described events that occurred many years ago, when the border between worlds was thinner and reality more fragile. The entries recounted the stories of people who had sought to decipher the mysterious symbols, and how, one day, their quest led them to contact beings from another dimension. According to the author, these beings were both harbingers of hope and harbingers of doom. Every word on those pages evoked a strange feeling of déjà vu in me, as though I had already faced such trials in other worlds and lives. Suddenly, the silence was broken by a dull thud echoing through the building. I felt my heart beat faster and turned uncertainly, trying to locate the source of the sound. Behind the door leading to the next corridor, a silhouette appeared, a form unlike any living creature I had ever seen. The silhouette was shrouded in darkness, its contours merging with the night. In that moment, as if obeying an unknown law, I felt an inner calling, an invitation to pass through this door despite all my fears and doubts. I knew that trials awaited me ahead that might cost me everything, but there was no turning back. Overcoming the trembling in my voice and the goosebumps on my skin, I stepped into a corridor where the darkness seemed to be a living entity, and the silence a portent of doom. The light of the lantern I had taken with me by chance cast long shadows on the walls, and each one told its own story. My footsteps echoed on the stone floor, and I felt myself sinking deeper into an atmosphere where past and present merged into one intricate pattern. The sounds of footsteps and the soft rustle of paper might have belonged to invisible guardians of this place, entrusted with the secrets beyond ordinary comprehension. Before long, I found myself in a room where the air was filled with an indescribable chill, and the walls were covered with symbols reminiscent of ancient incantations. In the center of the room lay a circle drawn in chalk on the cold floor, and in the middle of that circle lay a small, yet evidently significant object, an amulet emitting a strange, barely perceptible glow. I knew that this amulet was the key to unlocking the mysteries hidden in this ominous place. Its shape and patterns echoed the symbols described in the notebook, and I felt my heart quicken in anticipation of the encounter with the unknown. Summoning all my courage, I picked up the amulet and felt a cold energy permeate every cell of my body. In that moment, fragments of thought flashed through my mind. The realization that everything happening was not coincidental. Perhaps my destiny had been sealed long before I set foot on this forbidden territory. I understood that the amulet was not merely an artifact, but a kind of conduit between worlds, capable of opening the gates to another dimension. But such power always comes at a price, and I could not help but wonder what price I would have to pay for unraveling this mystery. Unexpectedly, a low, almost imperceptible whisper filled the air around me. A voice, emanating from the depths of my consciousness, said, "You are not alone, Victoria. Behind every shadow, there are more shadows, and every truth conceals a lie." Those words, filled with ancient wisdom and simultaneous caution, made me freeze in place. I felt as though time had stopped, while the darkness around me deepened, ready to engulf me completely. Yet even in the face of inevitable danger, I could not retreat. My inner sense of justice and longing for truth compelled me to press on, regardless of the fear and unseen threats. My further steps led me to an old library located in the basement of a deserted mansion, where, according to rumors, records of ancient rituals and contacts with other worlds were kept. The shelves, burdened with dusty tomes and manuscripts, seemed to be silent witnesses to an era when the boundary between the living and the supernatural was far thinner than it is now. There, among forgotten pages and tattered bindings, I discovered the diary of one of the former guardians of the border. Its entries were filled with ominous reflections, warnings, and descriptions of events that made my blood run cold. The diary recounted how, one night when the moon hid behind the clouds, inexplicable phenomena began to occur within the mansion's walls. Shadows started moving on their own, and sounds resembling the cries and whispers of long-departed souls filled the corridors. The guardian, describing his feelings, wrote, "I felt that every movement of mine was being watched by unseen forces, and that my soul was gradually detaching from my flesh. The boundary between worlds had become transparent, and I saw things that no human mind should ever witness." These words made me wonder if indeed my fate was entwined with the ancient mysteries hidden behind every door in this place. Moving further, I found myself in a narrow corridor whose walls were scrawled with enigmatic symbols that shimmered in the dim light. These symbols seemed to pulsate in rhythm with my heartbeat, stirring memories of images I could never forget. They were a sign that behind every corner lay something that defied logic and common sense. Fear intermingled with curiosity, pushing me forward, and I began to understand intuitively that every inscription on these walls was a key to comprehending the true nature of what was unfolding. In one of these corridors, I stumbled upon a small room where the air was imbued with the scent of old candles and fading memories. On the wall hung a portrait of a woman with eyes full of melancholy and unending sorrow. The face in the portrait was at once familiar and strange, as if it were a reflection of my own, from a past I had desperately tried to forget. Next to the portrait stood a writing desk, on which lay another diary, written in a neat hand that described rituals aimed at restoring the balance between worlds. Every entry in that diary was filled with the terror of the inevitable consequences of breaching the border between the living and the dead. I read every word, and with each paragraph, The sense of foreboding and premonition grew stronger. Suddenly, the door leading to the adjacent room slammed shut behind me with a resounding crash, causing my heart to pound frantically in my chest. I tried to open it, but the door was locked, and panic set in as I realized I was trapped in a labyrinth of ghosts from the past. In that moment, memories of all the lost friends and acquaintances who had warned me about the risks of seeking the truth came crashing back with renewed force. Yet, despite the fear and doubts, I knew I had to find a way out. A thought kept repeating in my mind. Every door, even if it appears locked, has a key. You just have to find it. In search of an exit, I began to inspect the room closely. Through gaps in the old walls, I noticed a faint glimmer of light. That barely visible crack seemed to be my only chance for salvation. I approached it, and with some effort pushed aside the debris that hindered the light's entry. In that instant, the light flooded through the small opening, revealing a narrow passage that led to yet another part of this eerie building. My heart raced, but I understood that there was no time for hesitation. Clutching the amulet in my hand, I stepped into the new corridor without looking back. This corridor was narrow and long, its walls inscribed with ancient symbols and runes. Every mark seemed to be alive, as if trying to deliver a message from the past. I could feel invisible eyes watching my every move, and each echo of my footsteps confirmed that I was not alone. Suddenly, from the depths of the corridor, a soft, almost imperceptible laugh was heard, a laugh imbued with the irony of fate and a chilling premonition of doom. That eerie melody of fear made me shudder, yet at the same time, it stirred an indomitable resolve within me to uncover what lay beyond the boundary of my understanding. Minute by minute, the corridor became more twisted, and its corners grew darker. At one point, it seemed to me that the walls were closing in, and that the air had become so thick it was hard to breathe. I felt my fear gradually transforming into determination. I had to uncover the truth, even if it turned out to be the most terrifying of all possibilities. My hands trembled, but my heart was steadfast. Every detail of this place, from the creaking floorboards to the soft whispers of unseen voices, was a part of a grand mystery that I was determined to solve at any cost. The passage eventually led me into a small hall where time seemed to have frozen. In the center of the hall was a round table, covered in the dust of centuries, surrounded by antique chairs that once hosted those who knew more than an ordinary life would allow. On the table lay scattered pieces of paper with rough sketches of maps, diagrams of rituals, and ancient inscriptions so cryptic their meanings escaped a casual glance. I sensed that every detail here had been deliberately left by someone who wanted to pass on a message to future generations. Perhaps it was a clue on how to properly cross the boundary between worlds, or a warning that every discovery comes with its own danger. Suddenly, a slender figure appeared from behind one of the walls in the hall, barely distinguishable in the half-light. The figure was dressed in a long gown, its face hidden beneath a hood. It silently approached me, and in its voice was a deep sadness, as if it carried the weight of age-old suffering. "You have found what you were seeking," it whispered, its words echoing like an ancient prophecy. "But know that every truth comes at a price, and you must be prepared to pay it." These words made my heart constrict with anxiety. Who was this woman? What price must I pay for my relentless quest for the truth? The figure came closer and handed me a small, leather-bound folder, decorated with patterns reminiscent of the symbols I had seen earlier. I opened it and discovered inside an old scroll depicting scenes of people confronting supernatural forces. Every drawing was filled with ominous details, and the symbols on the scroll seemed to be alive, as if breathing with their own life. It became clear to me that this scroll was the key to understanding the mysteries surrounding the crossing of the border between worlds, and perhaps it would help me find a way out of this labyrinth. The light in the hall began to dim, and the room filled with a chill, as if death itself had come to claim the last traveler. The figure vanished as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving me alone with its message and the terror that gripped every cell of my body. Clutching the scroll, I sensed invisible forces beginning to surround me, penetrating into the deepest recesses of my soul. My thoughts mingled with the voices of the past, and I realized that the answers I sought had long been near. They were woven into the very fabric of this eerie place. The lantern's light began to flicker, and the corridors seemed to stir, inviting me to venture further into the depths of the unknown. I left the hall, carrying the scroll and the amulet as symbols of both hope and danger. Every step I took resonated through the labyrinthine corridors, and the thought that I was standing at the boundary between worlds filled me with both trepidation and resolve. I understood that there was no turning back. The truth I sought demanded my complete immersion in darkness and the unknown. Along winding corridors, I discovered a staircase leading to a dungeon where, according to legend, ancient artifacts and ritual items capable of opening the gates between worlds were hidden. Descending, I found myself in an expansive hall, whose walls were adorned with frescoes depicting scenes from the myths and legends of ancient peoples. Every brushstroke, every line on the frescoes seemed not merely a picture, but a key to mysteries that had remained unsolved for centuries. There, I saw images of beings resembling semi-divine guardians who protected the boundary between worlds, and I realized that my fate was now inextricably linked with these ancient forces. At the center of the hall stood an altar covered in a thin layer of dust and time. On the altar lay various objects, from ancient daggers to symbolic figurines depicting gods and spirits. According to the diary's accounts, this was the place where the ritual awakening of a force capable of uniting two worlds was to take place. I carefully placed the amulet and the scroll on the altar, feeling the energy of the place intensify around me. The air quivered, and the walls seemed to echo with ancient whispers. This was the moment of truth, the moment when the choice I had made would determine not only my fate, but also the course of events connected to the boundary between life and death. I recalled the words of the mysterious woman, "Every truth comes at a price." In that moment, I realized that the price might be exorbitantly high, but retreat was no longer an option. I concentrated, recalled the ancient incantations I had heard in the diary, and began to recite the words that reverberated through the emptiness of the hall. With each uttered sound, the altar began to glow with a faint but growing light. The shadows that had previously lurked in the corners started to move, and the air around me filled with an invisible force, as if nature itself were gathering to bear witness to this ritual. Suddenly, the floor of the hall trembled, and from beneath the altar, a faint light arose, swirling into a vortex of fleeting images. Before me, the images of ancient guardians appeared, their faces filled with wisdom and pain, their eyes shining with a cold light. One of the guardians approached me and whispered, "Your soul is chosen, Victoria. But know that knowledge is a burden, and it demands sacrifices." Those words penetrated deep into my heart, evoking both fear and awe. At that very moment, I felt the energy in the hall, amplified by my words and the ancient incantations, begin to merge the past and the present. Worlds that had seemed separate now appeared as one, and I realized that I stood on the threshold of a discovery that could change everything. With each passing moment, the vibrations of the space around me grew more palpable, and time itself seemed to waver. I saw the images of the past become clearer, while the whispers of ancient voices filled my consciousness with long-forgotten knowledge. And then, in the midst of that mystical union, a portal appeared before my eyes, a shimmering veil behind which lay another world, full of unexplored mysteries and dangers. My heart pounded so fiercely, it seemed it would burst from my chest. Yet I knew that stepping through the portal was a step into the unknown, where every moment could be my last. Before me stood a choice: to remain in this world where ancient knowledge and power intertwined with peril, or to take a decisive step and cross the border into the unexplored. Recalling all the warnings, the mysterious woman's words, and the images recorded in the diaries, I realized that my destiny had never been accidental. My journey was not merely an attempt to find answers to the questions that tormented my soul, but a quest for a truth that could change not only my life, but also the fates of all who dared to follow. Clutching the amulet in my hand and taking a deep breath, I stepped toward the portal. In that moment, time seemed to stop, and I felt all the forces of the world converging into this one decisive moment. When I crossed the threshold, the world around me transformed. I found myself in a realm where the laws of physics and logic gave way to inexplicable phenomena. Here, every movement of the air, every sound, every shadow carried its own significance. The border between worlds was blurred, and I sensed that invisible threads were binding me to this realm, as though I had become an integral part of it. Around me, luminous silhouettes floated, and I heard the echoes of voices welcoming me like an old friend. This was a place where fear and hope danced together in a single waltz, where every moment brimmed with the potential for change. In the distance, I saw the silhouette of a grand building resembling an ancient temple, and I understood that the answer to all my questions lay within its walls. The road to the temple was winding and dangerous, filled with traps and riddles, but the desire to uncover the truth propelled me forward. Each step resonated in this strange world, and every turn seemed to test my faith and courage. On my way to the temple, I encountered beings unlike any earthly animals, creatures that exuded an ancient power and wisdom. They silently observed me, and in their eyes I saw a reflection of my own destiny, a destiny intertwined with the eternal search for truth and the meaning of existence. One such encounter occurred near an ancient pond, its water dark and mysterious. Next to me stood a figure in a long robe, and in a voice like the wind whispering along the pond's edge, it said, "Your path is chosen. But remember, Victoria, that the truth can be bitter. Are you ready to learn what lies beyond the boundary of the familiar?" Those words, spoken without excess emotion, stirred both fear and resolve within me. I replied only with silence, yet my inner voice insisted that time was relentlessly moving forward, and I had to follow my own path, no matter how difficult it might be. Passing through a thicket where the shadows of trees danced in time with the night winds, I finally reached the entrance of the temple. Its massive doors were adorned with carvings, depicting battles between light and darkness, good and evil, life and death. With trembling voice and inevitable resolve, I approached the door, recalling all the words and signs that had brought me here. I placed my hand on the ancient surface, and suddenly, the door swung open, admitting me into the half-light of a vast hall. The hall was illuminated by the flickering light of torches, and the air was imbued with the aroma of incense and ancient rituals. On an altar at the center of the hall lay a book with thick, yellowed pages, upon which centuries-old knowledge was inscribed. This book was the sacred covenant between worlds, and I realized that the answer to all the mysteries of my journey was contained within its pages. I carefully opened the book, and the words written on its pages seemed to come alive, filling the hall with the sounds of long-forgotten languages. Every word, every incantation penetrated deep into my soul, evoking memories of experiences I had already lived in other worlds and lifetimes. Like a flowing stream, the knowledge enveloped me, opening before me endless expanses of truth that had once seemed unattainable. I read about ancient rituals, about contacts with otherworldly beings, about guarding the border between worlds, and I understood that my mission was not merely to seek the truth, but to preserve it and pass it on to those who dared to look beyond the familiar. Suddenly, a low rumble echoed through the hall, like distant thunder, and the pages of the book began to turn on their own. I felt invisible forces rushing toward me, trying to deliver a message so ancient and powerful that it could change the course of history. Every word, every illustration in the book seemed to call me to action, to make a choice that would determine not only my future, but that of all who believed in the power of truth. At that moment, I realized that I stood on the threshold of the greatest discovery of my life. The border between worlds was not merely a line, but a delicate thread connecting souls, times, and spaces. The truth I had been searching for turned out to be an intrinsic part of the eternal cycle of birth and death, light and darkness. And although the price of knowledge might be unbearably high, I was prepared to pay it, to preserve the light in this world and pass it on. The words of ancient voices, the whispers of shadows, and the pulsating light of the torches merged into a single symphony, heralding the beginning of a new era. In that moment, I felt that my destiny was not just a personal story, but part of a grand design in which every soul plays its role. My experiences, fears, and hopes became threads woven into the endless tapestry of time. And if you, dear viewers, feel ready to embark on your own journey, to seek the truth, and understand that the borders between worlds are mere illusions, then subscribe to my channel, hit like, and share this video. Perhaps it is your heart that will open up to new knowledge and dare to peer beyond the boundaries of the familiar. My journey continued, and every new step became a trial, filled with inexplicable phenomena and encounters with beings that existed between worlds. I walked along narrow corridors of ancient ruins, where the walls told stories of forgotten civilizations, where every stone preserved the memory of bygone eras. My mind teemed with questions. What if the border between worlds is not a barrier, but an invitation to understanding? What if the fear we feel at the sight of the unknown is merely a reflection of our own inner demons? On one such winding path, I came across an abandoned chapel, standing at the edge of nowhere, as if forgotten by time. Its windows were shattered, and the doors, adorned with intricate carvings, spoke of a former glory and mystical power that once enveloped this place. Inside the chapel, there was a strange, almost sacred silence. A gentle breeze sneaked in through the broken windows, stirring the dust and creating the illusion of an unseen presence. I felt as if this silence filled me with both calm and dread, as though here I could hear the voice of destiny itself. Approaching the altar, covered in small inscriptions in an ancient language, I discovered yet another note left by someone who, too, had sought answers to the questions of existence. The inscription read, "Truth is born where fear gives way to love, and the border between worlds is only a reflection of our souls." Those words made me ponder how deeply our beliefs and emotions shape our perception of reality. Perhaps true strength resided not in an amulet or a scroll, but in our own hearts, capable of overcoming any obstacle. I spent several hours in the chapel, contemplating what I had read and absorbing the atmosphere of antiquity. Time here seemed to flow differently, as if the universe itself had decided to slow its pace, allowing every moment to stretch into eternity. At that moment, I realized that my quest had led me not only to the border between worlds, but also to the boundary between past and present, between fear and hope. This realization became my guiding star, indicating that the answers that had eluded me for so long were now beckoning me forward. When I finally stepped out of the chapel, the sky was already beginning to lighten, as if the night was yielding before the face of a new day. But even the dawn could not dispel the darkness that had taken residence in my soul. I understood that every moment I had experienced, every fear and every encounter, had become part of my journey, a part of a grand story that continues even today. My feet carried me along a winding road where every turn could bring either solace or fresh pain, new hope, or another trial. And so, after many days of wandering between worlds and eras, I reached the place I had dreamed of my entire life. It was a place where the boundary between what we call life and what lies beyond became as transparent as a gossamer veil. Here, I found the answer to the question that had tormented my heart from the very beginning. What is true freedom? The answer was not in fleeing reality, but in accepting it in all its complexity, with all its fears, shadows, and light. At that moment, I understood that crossing the border was not merely a physical act, but a profound spiritual journey through which we come to know ourselves. Every encounter, every loss, every trial overcame became a step leading to a higher truth. I recalled the words of the mysterious woman, her soft voice filled with sorrow and wisdom, and I felt how the warmth of her words comforted my heart, even in this cold, uncharted realm. I decided that my story was not just a tale of fear and the unknown, but an invitation to everyone willing to ask themselves, what if the boundary between worlds is an invitation to freedom? If you, dear viewers, feel that the fire of curiosity burns in your soul, if you are ready to risk everything to uncover new horizons, then remember, each of us is capable of crossing the border that separates fear from love, the known from the unknown. My journey did not end the moment I crossed that threshold. It merely transformed, evolving into an endless quest for truth and an aspiration to understand the depths of one's own soul. Every new day brought fresh challenges and revelations. Sometimes it felt as though time merged into a single moment, and all the past, present, and future existed simultaneously, intertwined in an endless dance of existence. I remember once, when the moon had risen high in the night sky, standing on the edge of a cliff, watching the twinkling lights of a distant city. In that moment, I realized that my life was a continuous movement forward, regardless of all the fears and doubts. The boundaries we perceive around us often exist only in our minds. True freedom comes when we learn to see beyond the visible, when we realize that our soul is capable of soaring above earthly cares and fears. If this story has made you reflect on your own boundaries, if it has ignited in you a desire to seek answers and overcome your fears, I invite you to subscribe to my channel so that together we can continue on this journey toward truth. Every click, every comment becomes a part of the vast tapestry we weave together, exploring the depths of our consciousness and the mysterious realms that lie beyond the familiar. Thus, my story, full of secrets, fear, and an insatiable thirst for knowledge, draws to a close. But remember, every story is just the beginning of a new path. Our boundaries are as mutable as we are. And if you are ready to take the risk, if you are prepared to open your heart to the unknown, then step forward boldly, for it is beyond the borders of the familiar that the answers to life's most important questions hide. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Subscribe, hit like, and may every step you take lead you to light and true freedom. May this story inspire you to embark on your own quest and help you understand that behind every fear might lie the source of endless strength and wisdom. The world around us is full of mysteries, and only the brave dare to look them in the eye. May your path be illuminated by the light of truth, and every encounter be a step toward understanding the great mystery of existence. I, Victoria, will forever remain your guide in this realm between worlds, ready to share with you all the revelations that my further journey brings. Remember, true strength lies not in the absence of fear, but in the ability to move forward in spite of it. May the boundaries you see dissolve before the radiance of your soul, and every new dawn become the beginning of an amazing story, full of hope, love, and boundless wisdom. And so, when the first ray of the sun touched the horizon, I felt within me a new sensation, a feeling of freedom and acceptance. In this world, where darkness and light intertwine, I found my truth. May your hearts also open to new wonders, and every obstacle become merely a step on the path to a great discovery. Thank you for listening to my story. Remember, the truth is always near, if only you dare to see it. Until next time, dear friends, and may your journey be as thrilling and endless as my own story of crossing the border between worlds. The end.